covering our last section of our book, Decolonial Marxism by Walter Rodney, Chapter 4, Section 4, Decolonization. I'll be your host, King Gino. And yeah, let's get into it. Colonialism, the formal political control by one country over another territory, often involving economic exploitation, cultural domination, and direct administration by the colonizing power. Rodney refers to places like Zimbabwe and South Africa as examples of regions still under traditional colonial rule in the 60s and 70s. I like this because it shows how what European power or international influence controls which part of Africa. Neocolonialism, the indirect control or influence exerted by former colonial powers or new imperial forces over supposedly independent countries, primarily through economic means, political pressure, and cultural domination. Rodney emphasizes that even after political independence, many African countries remain trapped in a structure of dependency, with local elites often serving the same exploitative system as their colonial predecessors. So, you know, even though they're not a colony of said country, the people in power still, show allegiance to those countries, show favor to those countries and trade deals, and oftentimes lend money from them, putting them in debt with those countries and literally indebted to those countries, so still serving their interests. Decolonization, the process of freeing a country from colonial rule. Rodney expands this beyond former political independence to include genuine social, economic, and cultural liberation. Rodney critiques the UN's limited definition of decolonization as merely ending formal rule and insists that true decolonization must involve deeper structural changes. Nominal independence, political independence that is superficial or symbolic, lacking a real sovereignty in economic and social domains. Rodney critiques African states that have replaced white colonial administrators with Black elites who perpetuate the same structures of exploitation. Blueprint states, yardstick effect. The idea that newly independent nations serve as models, either positive or cautionary, for others still fighting for freedom. Angola, Mozambique, and Guinea-Bissau use countries like Zambia and Guinea as benchmarks for what post-independence could look like and often what to avoid. Political facade versus structural transformation. The distinction between merely replacing political rulers and deeply changing the economic and social systems that uphold exploitation. Rodney insists that true decolonization must go beyond swapping out rulers. It must dismantle imperialist modes of production and redistribute power and wealth. Leadership crisis, ideological maturity. The disconnect between revolutionary leadership and the people, especially when leaders become elites who no longer represent the interest of the masses. Rodney warns that leadership from the earlier era of decolonization may become obsolete unless it evolves alongside the people's political maturity. And for me, this parallels with like people who are part of the civil rights movement. And sometimes it feels like their views are obsolete because they've gotten old and their strategy and tactics don't necessarily apply to the world we live in today. So it's just like not relevant. And, there becomes a disconnect between the younger generation and the older generation of leaders. And it really, it's really an obstacle to, revolution or political and social change. And as you can see, like, they're all the same hands. One hand is the chair, it's a puppet chair, and the other hand is the puppet leader sitting in the chair, both being puppets of imperialism. Economic reparation. The shifting of control and benefit from African economic activity. The US gradually replacing European powers as the primary economic beneficiary in Africa, especially through multinational corporations. So that's how the United States benefits from all of the exploitation in Africa. It's usually through multinational corporations. The role of the United States. Not a traditional colonizer in Africa, but operates economically through corporate power, operates politically by supporting reactionary regimes and interfering in liberation processes. So yes, funding political parties in other countries that serve your country's interest, interfering in other people's elections. Very common tactic of the United States. And that brings us to the end of our book. In conclusion, the liberation of one African country affects how others interpret and pursue their own decolonization. Neocolonialism doesn't replace colonialism in a clear sequence. Rather, they coexist and shape each other, changing the nature of liberation movements, leadership expectations, and definitions of freedom. Because colonialism and neocolonialism do exist at the same time during this time, and as of right now, current day. So, yeah, that is it. Thank y'all so much for tuning in for this great series. You have a new book coming soon, maybe a new YouTube page or whatever you know. But for now, I'll see ya. Turning pages, sparking conversations. Thank you. Schmoop. So Jay